Professor Thala stood in her office at Galactic Academy Station Omega 7, watching the stars through the massive viewing window. Her crystalline body glowed soft blue as she reviewed the files on her desk. Today was special. For the first time in the Academy's 300-year history, they would welcome a human student. The Academy had hosted beings from across the galaxy. There were the gas-breathing Methani who floated in special chambers. The rock-like Quotient who ate minerals for breakfast. Even the dangerous flame dancers from the volcanic worlds had studied here safely. But humans were different. They came from Earth, a planet so hostile that other species called it a death world. Professor Thala called Dr. Morris as he rushed into her office. His 6 arms waved frantically above his blue-scaled body. The human transport has arrived, but we have a serious problem. Thala's crystal form shifted to concerned yellow. What kind of problem? Biosecurity has flagged dangerous materials in the human's luggage. The scanners show multiple containers of some kind of industrial chemical. It registers as highly toxic and extremely flammable. This was not how Thala had hoped to start the semester. She followed Dr. Morris through the station's curved hallways to the security checkpoint. Other faculty members were already gathered there, their various forms creating a colorful crowd around the scanning equipment. The security screens showed clear images of the suspicious containers. The liquid inside was dark, almost black. The chemical analysis flashed warning signs in 17 different languages. Toxic, flammable, lethal to most species, the warnings read. Where is the human now? Thala asked. Containment Room 3, replied Captain Rex, the station's security chief. His metallic body clanked as he pointed down the hall. We followed standard protocol for hazardous materials. They walked quickly to the containment room. Through the clear walls, Thala could see a young human male sitting calmly at a metal table. He looked tired, which she would later learn was very important. His brown hair was messy, and his clothes were wrinkled from the long space journey. The human looked up as they entered. Hi, he said with a friendly smile. I'm James Parker. Is there some kind of problem? They won't let me have my bags. Dr. Morris stepped forward, his primary eyes focused on James while his secondary eyes watched the door. We need to discuss the dangerous chemicals you brought aboard this station. James looked genuinely confused. Dangerous chemicals? I just brought some clothes, books, and my coffee supplies. Nothing dangerous. Coffee? Thala asked. Her translator struggled with the unfamiliar word. Yeah, coffee. James pointed toward the security area. Those dark containers have my coffee beans and ground coffee. I brought enough for the whole semester. Can't function without my morning coffee. The faculty members exchanged worried glances. Professor Kelly, whose tentacles were always moving when she was nervous, spoke up. You brought industrial solvent to consume. What? No. James laughed, but then his expression grew serious as he saw their faces. Coffee isn't industrial solvent. It's a drink. Humans drink coffee every day. It's completely normal. Dr. Morris pulled up the chemical analysis on his portable screen. This substance contains alkaloids that would kill most known species within minutes. The molecular structure suggests it's designed to destroy biological systems. James stared at the screen, then back at the assembled faculty. Slowly, he began to understand the problem. These beings had never encountered coffee before. To them, it looked like poison. Okay, James said carefully, I can see why you're worried. But coffee isn't poison to humans. We've been drinking it for thousands of years. It helps us wake up and stay alert. It's like fuel for our brains. You consume toxins for energy. Captain Rex's mechanical voice carried disbelief. Well, when you put it that way, it sounds bad, James admitted. But it's not toxic to us. Actually, it makes us feel better and work better. Most humans drink it every single day. Professor Thala's crystal body had shifted through several colors during this conversation. She was trying to process this information. A species that consumed what appeared to be industrial poison as daily fuel? It challenged everything she knew about biology. How much of this substance do you consume? She asked. Usually 2 or 3 cups a day, James replied. Some people drink more. My roommate back on Earth drinks like 6 cups a day. He's fine. Dr. Morris made notes on his data pad. Your species voluntarily consumes a lethal toxin multiple times per day and considers this normal behavior. I guess so? James was starting to look worried. Look, I know Earth is different from other planets. We humans have adapted to live there. Maybe we can handle things that other species can't. This comment sent a ripple of interest through the faculty. Dr. Nina, the Academy's biochemist, stepped forward. Her purple skin was covered in the glowing dots that indicated excitement in her species. "You're suggesting that humans have evolved to process substances that are lethal to other life forms?" she asked. "Maybe," James said. "I never really thought about it before. On Earth, lots of things are dangerous. Spicy food, alcohol, even sunlight can hurt you if you're not careful. But we've learned to live with these things. Maybe even use them." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't just dealing with a student from a dangerous planet. They were hosting a representative of a species that had learned to turn their planet's dangers into advantages. Professor Thala made a decision. "We'll allow you to keep your coffee supplies under medical supervision. Dr. Morris will monitor your consumption and health effects. This could be the most important research opportunity in the Academy's history." James smiled with relief. "Thanks. I promise coffee is safe for humans. You'll see." As they led James to his dormitory, Professor Thala couldn't stop thinking about what they had just learned. Humans didn't just survive on their death world. They had found ways to use its dangers as tools. What other impossible adaptations would they discover about these remarkable beings? The semester was going to be far more interesting than anyone had imagined. 3 days had passed since James arrived at the Academy, and word about the human strange fuel had spread through every department. Students whispered in the hallways about the being who drank poison for breakfast. Faculty members debated in the cafeteria about impossible death world adaptations. Now, in the advanced chemistry lab, Professor Kelly was about to witness something that would change xenobiology forever. The lab was filled with students from 17 different species, each more curious than the last. The methane-breathing Kethtar had positioned themselves near their specialized air filters, their gray skin absorbing nutrients through tiny pores. The plant-like Chlorians stood directly under the room's bright spectrum lights, their green leaves rustling softly as they processed solar energy. Near the back, 3 crystalline Quotient munched quietly on iron pellets, their rocky bodies grinding the metal into digestible powder. The sound reminded everyone of gravel in a cement mixer. James sat at his assigned station, a simple ceramic mug and a thermos of coffee in front of him. Around his workstation, an impressive array of monitoring equipment hummed and beeped. Heart rate monitors, brain activity scanners, blood chemistry analyzers, and reflex testing devices all focused on the human. Professor Kelly's 8 tentacles moved nervously as she organized her notes. "Today we will observe metabolic fuel consumption across different species," she announced to the class. "Each species has evolved unique ways to convert raw materials into usable energy." She gestured toward the Kethtar. The methane process atmospheric gases through their skin, converting methane directly into cellular energy. The gray-skinned beings puffed slightly, demonstrating their absorption process. "The Chlorians," she continued, "use photosynthesis, much like the plants on many worlds." The plant beings swayed gently under their lights, looking content and well-fed. "And our Quartian friends consume rare minerals, breaking them down in specialized stomach chambers." One of the rock people crunched loudly on a copper coin, nodding politely. "Now," Professor Kelly said, her voice carrying a mixture of excitement and concern, "we come to our human subject. James, would you please demonstrate your species' metabolic fuel consumption?" The entire lab fell silent. Even the normally chattering squeakers stopped their high-pitched conversations to watch. Every eye, sensor, and detection organ in the room focused on James. James looked around at the expectant faces and smiled. "Sure thing." He unscrewed the cap of his thermos, releasing a rich, dark aroma that made several species recoil in alarm. Dr. Morris, who was monitoring from the side of the room, watched his scanning equipment carefully. "Baseline readings established," he announced. "Human heart rate, 70 beats per minute. Brain activity, normal resting state. Blood chemistry, stable." James poured the dark liquid into his mug. The coffee was perfectly black, steaming slightly, and looked exactly like the industrial solvents used in the station's maintenance department. "Here goes nothing," James said cheerfully, lifting the mug to his lips. The moment the coffee touched his tongue, the monitoring equipment exploded into activity. Heart rate spiking. Dr. Morris called out, his voice rising with alarm. 70 to 90 to 100 beats per minute and climbing. James took a larger sip, swallowing the hot coffee with obvious pleasure. "Brain activity increasing dramatically," shouted Dr. Nina from her biochemistry station. "Neural electrical activity up 300%. This is impossible." The displays around the room showed James's vital signs going crazy. His heart rate had jumped to 110 beats per minute. His brain scans showed activity levels that should indicate extreme stress or panic. His blood chemistry was changing rapidly as unknown compounds entered his system. Emergency medical intervention required, Dr. Morris declared, rushing toward James with a medical scanner in each of his 6 hands. But James just sat there, calmly taking another sip of coffee. "Whoa there," James said, raising his free hand. "I'm fine. Actually, I feel great." This statement caused even more panic among the observers. The Kethtar began making distressed whistling sounds. The Chlorian's leaves turned pale green with worry. Even the normally unflappable cautions stopped eating their metal snacks. "The toxin readings are off the charts," Dr. Nina announced, her purple skin flashing urgent warning colors. "His system is flooded with alkaloids that should cause immediate cardiac arrest." James looked at the panicked faces around him and realized he needed to explain. "Look, I know this looks scary, but this is completely normal for humans. Coffee makes us more alert and focused. It's supposed to increase heart rate and brain activity." "Supposed to?" Professor Kelly's tentacles were writhing with confusion. "You deliberately consume a substance that causes severe physiological stress." "It's not stress," James protested, though he could feel the familiar coffee energy surging through his body. His thoughts felt sharper, his reflexes quicker. "It's enhancement. Watch this." Before anyone could stop him, James stood up and moved to the reflex testing station. He placed his hand on the reaction pad and nodded to Dr. Morris. "Test my reflexes now," he said. Dr. Morris, too curious to refuse, activated the random stimulus generator. Lights flashed from different directions, requiring James to hit corresponding buttons as quickly as possible. The results were staggering. Reaction time improved by 290%, Dr. Morris read from his scanner. Hand-eye coordination up 400%. Cognitive processing speed increased by 350%. The lab fell completely silent. James grinned and took another sip of coffee. "See? It's not poison to us. It's like a performance booster. Makes us better at everything." Professor Kelly's tentacles had stopped moving entirely. "You're saying this toxic substance actually improves your abilities?" "Absolutely," James replied. "Without coffee, most humans feel tired and slow. With coffee, we can think faster, work harder, and stay alert for hours." Dr. Nina was frantically taking notes. The human has voluntarily consumed a lethal toxin and experienced enhanced performance rather than death. The implications hit everyone at once. Humans didn't just survive consuming poison. They had turned poison into fuel. They had weaponized their planet's dangers for personal advantage. As the class ended and students filed out in stunned silence, James finished his coffee and packed up his things. He noticed the other students giving him a wide berth, their various forms of eyes watching him with mixtures of fear and fascination. Tomorrow's classes would be very interesting indeed. 2 weeks had passed since the coffee demonstration, and the medical bay looked nothing like it used to. What was once a quiet healing center had become the busiest research facility on the station. Charts covered every wall, showing human biological data in colorful graphs and diagrams. Computer screens displayed molecular structures that made no sense to most galactic species. Dr. Nina had not left her laboratory for 3 straight days. Her purple skin had turned a pale lavender from exhaustion, but her excitement kept her going. She had discovered something that would change everything they thought they knew about life in the universe. The main research room buzzed with activity. Professor Thala stood near the center, her crystalline body shifting between colors as she processed the incredible information. Dr. Morris operated multiple scanners at once with his 6 arms, while Professor Kelly took notes with 4 of her tentacles and organized data with the other 4. James sat patiently in the center of it all, a fresh cup of coffee in his hands and monitoring wires attached to his arms and forehead. He had become the most studied being in the galaxy, and he was starting to enjoy the attention. "The results are confirmed," Dr. Nina announced to the gathered researchers. Her voice carried both wonder and disbelief. "The compound is called caffeine, and it should kill him." She activated the large display screen, showing a complex molecular diagram. "This alkaloid is designed by nature as a pesticide. Plants make caffeine to poison insects that try to eat them. For 73% of known galactic species, this amount would cause immediate heart failure." Professor Thala's crystal body flashed bright orange with amazement. "But James consumes it daily and experiences enhanced performance." "Not just enhanced," Dr. Nina continued, pulling up James's test results. His reaction time improves dramatically. His memory becomes sharper. His physical coordination increases by over 200%. He literally becomes a superior version of himself. Dr. Morris looked up from his scanners. How is this possible? Every biological law we know says this should be impossible. Dr. Nina smiled, her skin returning to its normal purple as excitement overcame exhaustion. Earth is the answer. James comes from what we call a death world, but we never understood what that really meant. She changed the display to show images of Earth that James had shared with them. Massive storms, active volcanoes, deadly animals, and plants that could kill with a touch. Look at this planet, she said. Everything is trying to kill everything else. The weather is violent. The animals are dangerous. Even the plants fight back against anything that tries to eat them. James took a sip of coffee and nodded. Yeah, Earth can be pretty rough. But it's home. Rough? Dr. Morris's eyes widened. Your planet has creatures that hunt other creatures for food. Predators, James said casually. They're everywhere. Bears, tigers, sharks, wolves. You learn to be careful. The alien researchers exchanged shocked looks. Most of their homeworlds were peaceful places where the biggest danger was bad weather or maybe a rockslide. Dr. Nina continued her explanation. Humans didn't just survive on this hostile planet. They learned to use its dangers as tools. Caffeine is just one example. She pulled up a new chart showing human dietary habits. Humans regularly consume alcohol, another substance that would poison most species. They eat spicy foods that trigger pain responses. They even expose themselves to solar radiation deliberately. But why? Professor Kelly asked, her tentacles curling with confusion. Because it makes them stronger, Dr. Nina replied. Every challenge on Earth forced humans to adapt in impossible ways. They learned to process toxins safely and use them for advantage. James finished his coffee and looked around at the amazed faces. We call it building tolerance. If something doesn't kill you, it might make you tougher. My grandmother always said that. Dr. Morris ran another scan and shook his head in disbelief. Your grandmother was a biochemical genius. She made great coffee too, James added with a smile. Professor Thaler had been quiet through most of the discussion, but now her crystal form pulsed with urgent thoughts. If humans can safely consume caffeine, what other impossible things can they do? That's what we need to find out, Dr. Nina said. She pulled up a long list of research questions. James has agreed to help us study human capabilities. We're calling this project the Coffee Papers. The name made James laugh. Sounds important. It is important, Professor Thaler assured him. This research will change how we understand adaptation and survival. You've shown us that Death World species don't just endure their environments. They learn to weaponize them. Dr. Nina activated the communication array. I'm sending preliminary reports to xenobiology departments across 17 star systems. Every university in the galaxy needs to know about this. Over the next hour, responses began flooding in from across known space. Scientists from distant worlds demanded more information. Research stations requested permission to study their own Death World species. 3 different universities offered Dr. Nina full professorships if she would share her data. The most interesting response came from the War College on Centauri Prime. Their message was simple but telling. If humans can turn poison into performance enhancement, what can they do in combat situations? James raised an eyebrow when he heard that message. Should I be worried about that question? Professor Thaler's crystal body shifted to a reassuring blue. You're a student here, James. You're under academic protection. But that message does raise interesting points about human potential. Dr. Morris was already planning the next phase of research. We need to study human responses to stress, physical challenges, and environmental extremes. If caffeine is just the beginning, what else can humans do? Well, James said thoughtfully, there's also our relationship with exercise, competition, extreme sports, and emergency situations. Humans tend to perform better under pressure. The researchers looked at each other with growing excitement and concern. They had thought they were studying a simple dietary habit. Instead, they had discovered a species that had turned survival into an art form. As the day ended and the research team finally went to rest, James remained in the lab, reading reports about his own biology. It was strange to see himself described as an impossible adaptation to an impossible world. He poured himself one more cup of coffee and smiled. Tomorrow, they would probably want to study something else that humans took for granted. He wondered what would surprise them next. The galaxy was about to learn that humans were full of surprises. The fourth week of the semester started like any other, but by noon, everyone on the station knew something was terribly wrong with the human. James had been carefully managing his coffee supply since arriving at the academy. Each morning, he would measure out exactly enough grounds for 1 cup, knowing he had to make his supply last the entire semester. But yesterday evening, as he reached for his thermos, he made a horrible discovery. The container was empty. He had miscalculated. His coffee was gone, and the next supply shipment was not scheduled for another 3 weeks. Professor Thaler first noticed the problem during morning quantum physics class. James, who usually arrived early and sat in the front row with bright eyes and quick answers, stumbled in 10 minutes late. His hair was messy, dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his clothes looked like he had slept in them. "James," Professor Dale called out, her crystalline voice ringing through the classroom. "Can you solve the equation on the board?" James stared at the mathematical symbols for a long moment. Normally, quantum equations were easy for him. His coffee-enhanced brain could process complex calculations in seconds. But now, the numbers seemed to swim on the board. James rubbed his forehead where a pounding headache was building. "Could you repeat the question?" The other students looked concerned. Texa, a young crystalline being who sat near James, whispered to her neighbor, "Is the human malfunctioning?" By the second class, James's condition had worsened dramatically. In advanced chemistry, he knocked over 2 test tubes and gave completely wrong answers to simple questions. Professor Kelly's tentacles writhed with worry as she watched him struggle with problems that should have been basic for any academy student. "James," she said after class, "are you feeling unwell? Should we call Dr. Morris?" No, James insisted, though sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool temperature. "I'm fine. Just tired. Need my morning coffee is all." The word coffee sent alarm bells through the faculty. James had run out of his mysterious fuel. Dr. Morris arrived within minutes, his 6 arms carrying various medical scanners. "What are his symptoms?" he asked Professor Kelly. "Decreased cognitive function, physical discomfort, unusual sweating, and he keeps rubbing his head," she reported. Dr. Morris began scanning James immediately. The results were disturbing. Brain activity has decreased by 40% from his baseline readings. His stress hormones are elevated. He's showing signs of severe physiological distress. "It's just withdrawal," James tried to explain, but his words came out slurred and confused. "Happens when you stop drinking coffee suddenly. It's temporary." The word withdrawal hit the faculty like a plasma blast. Dr. Nina, who had been studying human biology for weeks, went pale purple with shock. "Withdrawal?" she repeated. "You mean your species experiences dependency on this toxin?" "Well, yeah," James admitted, slumping in his chair. "Most humans drink coffee every day. When you stop, you get headaches, feel tired, can't think straight. Lasts a few days usually." Professor Thaler's crystal form shifted through several colors of distress. "You're saying that billions of humans experience chemical dependency?" "I guess so," James said, his voice getting weaker. "Never really thought about it that way. We just call it being addicted to coffee. Everyone jokes about it." The implications were staggering. Dr. Morris called an emergency faculty meeting while James was taken to the medical bay for observation. In the conference room, the research team tried to process this new information. "The human has revealed that his entire species has become dependent on consuming a lethal toxin," Professor Thaler announced to the assembled faculty. Dr. Nina pulled up her research data. According to James, human civilization has built entire economic systems around caffeine distribution. They have specialized locations called coffee shops in every city. "Coffee shops?" Professor Dale's crystalline voice cracked with disbelief. "They have dedicated buildings for toxin distribution." "Multiple buildings," Dr. Nina continued, reading from her notes. "James mentioned something called a Starbucks on every corner. I believe this refers to widespread availability of the substance." Professor Quinn, the station's anthropologist, was frantically taking notes. "This suggests that human society has organized itself around the consumption and distribution of a psychoactive compound." Back in the medical bay, James was getting worse. His headache had intensified to the point where bright lights caused him pain. His hands shook slightly, and he had trouble focusing on simple conversations. "How long does this withdrawal process last?" Dr. Morris asked, monitoring James's vital signs. "Usually 3 to 5 days for the worst of it," James replied weakly. "But I'll feel tired and unfocused for weeks. Coffee doesn't just wake us up, it makes us feel normal. This statement caused another wave of panic among the medical staff. If coffee made humans feel normal, what were they like without it? The answer came over the following days as James's condition continued to deteriorate. His reaction times, which had been enhanced to superhuman levels with coffee, dropped below average for most galactic species. His memory became unreliable. Simple tasks that he had performed easily now required intense concentration. Dr. Nina documented everything. The human is experiencing what appears to be cognitive shutdown, she reported to the research team. Without his toxin, he becomes less capable than his baseline readings suggested. You mean coffee doesn't just enhance humans, Professor Thaler realized. They need it to function at normal levels. That's the terrifying conclusion, Dr. Nina confirmed. Humans have become so dependent on caffeine that they cannot operate normally without it. The emergency became critical when James's condition began affecting other students. His friends were worried, his study group was falling behind, and several alien students had started asking uncomfortable questions about human biology. Captain Rex made the decision that saved the semester. Emergency supply run, he announced. We're sending a high-speed transport to the nearest human trade station. We cannot afford to lose our research subject to toxin withdrawal. The transport left immediately, racing through hyperspace to acquire emergency coffee supplies. The entire station waited anxiously for its return. When the coffee finally arrived 18 hours later, James's recovery was swift and dramatic. Within 30 minutes of consuming his first cup, his cognitive function began returning to enhanced levels. His headache disappeared, his hands stopped shaking, and his personality returned to its normal cheerful state. Much better, he said with a satisfied smile, holding his steaming mug. Thanks for understanding. Caffeine withdrawal is no joke. The faculty watched in fascination and horror as their human student transformed from a barely functional being into an enhanced version of himself, all through the consumption of what their instruments still registered as deadly poison. Human society, they realized, had done something unprecedented in galactic history. They had not just adapted to survive their death world. They had become dependent on it. The main auditorium of Galactic Academy Station Omega 7 had never been so crowded. Word about the humans' impossible biology had spread throughout the entire station and beyond. Students from every department packed the seats. Faculty members stood along the walls. Even maintenance workers had found excuses to be in the area. James stood at the center podium, looking out at hundreds of curious faces, eyes, sensors, and other detection organs. In his hand, he held a fresh cup of coffee, steam rising from the dark liquid that had caused so much excitement over the past months. The massive display screen behind him showed his presentation title in 43 different languages, Human Survival Strategies, A Deathworlder's Perspective. Professor Thaler sat in the front row, her crystalline form glowing with anticipation. Dr. Nina had 3 recording devices running, determined not to miss a single word. Even Captain Rex had found a seat, his metallic body reflecting the stage lights. Thank you all for coming, James began, his voice carrying clearly through the auditorium's sound system. I know my biology has raised a lot of questions over the past few weeks. Today, I want to help you understand something important about humans. He raised his coffee mug slightly. Coffee is just the beginning. The audience stirred with interest. Several species made their various sounds of curiosity. James clicked to his first slide, showing images of Earth from space. The blue and green planet looked peaceful from a distance, but James knew the reality was very different. This is Earth, he said. Most of you call it a death world, and you're right. But what you might not understand is how that shaped us as a species. The next slide showed a massive hurricane swirling over an ocean. Our weather tries to kill us regularly. Storms with winds over 200 kilometers per hour. Lightning that can strike anywhere. Floods that destroy entire cities. Gasps echoed through the auditorium. Most species came from planets with gentle, predictable weather. But we learned to live with it, James continued. We built stronger houses. We developed warning systems. We turned the power of storms into electricity for our cities. The slide changed to show images of dangerous Earth animals. Lions hunting on African plains. Great white sharks in the ocean. Venomous snakes coiled and ready to strike. Our planet is full of creatures that want to eat us, James said matter-of-factly. So we became better at surviving. We learned to make tools, work together, and think our way out of danger. A Keftar student in the third row made a worried whistling sound. Their peaceful homeworld had no predators at all. Now here's where it gets interesting, James said, his voice growing more excited. We didn't just learn to avoid danger. We learned to use it. The next slide showed humans engaged in various activities that made the alien audience recoil in horror. People eating food so spicy that sweat poured down their faces, yet they were smiling. We eat plants that trigger pain responses, James explained. Chili peppers evolved capsaicin to stop animals from eating them. We consume it for pleasure. Dr. Morris's 6 arms waved in distress. Voluntary pain consumption. It gets better, James said with a grin. He clicked to the next slide showing humans drinking various alcoholic beverages at celebrations. This is alcohol, he announced. Another toxin that would kill most of you. We drink it to relax and socialize. We've built entire industries around it. Professor Kelly's tentacles had stopped moving entirely. She was too shocked to react. The slides continued, each one revealing another impossible human adaptation. People exercising at gyms, deliberately causing muscle damage to become stronger. Humans sunbathing, exposing themselves to radiation that would burn most species. Athletes pushing their bodies to exhaustion in competitive sports. We practice controlled suffering, James explained. We stress our bodies on purpose to make them tougher. We call it exercise, and we pay money to do it. The audience sat in stunned silence. The concept of voluntary suffering for improvement was completely alien to most galactic species. But the really interesting part, James continued, is how we handle extreme situations. The final slides showed humans in emergency situations. Firefighters running into burning buildings. Rescue workers saving people from disasters. Doctors working for days without sleep during medical emergencies. When things get dangerous, humans often perform better, James said. We have something called an adrenaline response. Stress hormones that make us faster, stronger, and more focused when we need it most. He paused to let that sink in. Other species try to avoid stress. We've learned to use it as fuel. Professor Thaller's crystal form had cycled through every color in her spectrum twice during the presentation. You're saying humans deliberately seek out challenges? We do, James confirmed. We climb mountains just because they are there. We explore dangerous places for fun. We compete against each other in activities that could hurt us, and we call it sports. The auditorium erupted in a mixture of amazement and horror. Different species expressed shock in their own ways. Chittering, harmonic resonance, color changes, and various other reactions filled the air. James raised his coffee mug high above his head. My friends, this is what I want you to understand about humans. We don't just survive our death world. We learn to love the challenge. He took a long sip of his coffee and smiled. To adaptation, evolution, and finding strength in the most impossible places. The response was overwhelming. Every species in the auditorium expressed approval in their own way, creating a symphony of alien applause that had never been heard before. As the crowd began to disperse, Professor Quinn approached the podium with obvious excitement. James, your presentation has revolutionized our understanding of survival adaptation. We never imagined that Death World species could be so creative. James finished his coffee and grinned. Professor, you haven't seen anything yet. Wait until I tell you about extreme sports, competitive eating, and our relationship with deadlines under pressure. Professor Thaler overheard and her crystal form flashed bright red with alarm. There's more? Oh yes, James laughed. We're just getting started. Humans have turned survival into an art form, and I've got a whole semester to show you how. As James packed up his presentation materials, he could hear excited conversations breaking out all around the auditorium. The galaxy was about to discover that the beings who ran on liquid rocket fuel were even more impossible than they had imagined. The universe would never look at Deathworld as the same way again.